Hello, welcome to week 2 of CNST 1731 Construction Print Reading. This week, I'd like to talk about the design and construction process. In the design and construction process, the owner has a problem, so we call that the project. The owner seeks a solution from a designer, and when they create that solution, we call it the design. Now we need to implement that design and have somebody build it, and so the designer will present that solution in the form of construction documents, what we call the plans. And that's what this course is all about. But it's important to understand the design and construction process and how construction print reading fits into it, how the plans are created, and how they interact with each other. Sometimes construction might be done by in-house forces. The maintenance crews of the college might rebuild something. And so then all you're concerned with is budgeting. Construction might be done by outside forces for a private owner. For example, you need your driveway rebuilt. In that case, you might request one or more prices from various contractors who do that work. Perhaps it is a public owner, such as a college or ODOT, who hires an outside contractor to do the work. Because it's in the public domain, it requires a competitive, open bid process. In all cases, you need a clear plan of construction. The construction prints must be understandable in order to have a successful project. The cost of the project is going to be determined by the scope. If you are replacing your driveway, the cost will be higher if you make it a 2-lane driveway as opposed to a 1-lane. If the work is being done in-house, then you simply need to develop a budget figure. If it's being done by outside, then multiple contractors have to offer the price on the same set of construction documents. Everybody must be bidding on the exact same work. And then hopefully the designer and the contractor and the owner are going to work together to complete the project. Now, if it's in-house, they might be all three represented by one entity. So let's take a look at all the components for construction documents. Depending upon the combination, you get the project manual, the contract documents, or the bidding documents. And this diagram is on Blackboard. The important thing about print reading is rule number 3, you need to take it all together. Reading just one portion of all those components I just showed you would be a mistake. So let's take a look at the bid requirements. Before any work can be done, we have to know how much it's going to cost. The bid document will cover these things: solicitation, instruction to bidders, official modifications, bid forms, the basis of award, and the lowest and best bid. Solicitation would include an invitation to bid. The county engineer is asking for bids on a roadway project. And that project will then be described in the solicitation. 4 miles of asphalt paving. It will include the date and time that the bids are due. And this date and time is hard and fast. If the bids are due on Tuesday at 2 p.m., coming in with the bid at 1 minute past 2 will not be allowed. If you are sending it by Federal Express, for example, there are some parts of in southern Ohio where overnight delivery of Federal Express will take 2 days. So you need to be very careful. The location for the bids to be turned in. The bids might be due at the county engineer's office, but walking in and dropping them off at the receptionist in the county office building might not be enough. The cost of the plans. Sometimes municipalities will sell the plans for a price, and oftentimes, if you are ever in the position of creating plans for a project, my recommendation is you charge a reasonable sum, not just to recover the cost of printing, which is relatively insignificant, but charge, let's say, $100 for the plans. This tends to weed out the 2 guys in a wheelbarrow who want to just pick up the plans for the sake of it and really do not have the ability to do the project. So this way only serious bidders are going to get to buy the plans. The instructions to bidders might include information about site visits for inspection before you bid, information about a pre-bid conference in which all interested bidders can ask questions and hear more about what the project is. Any required documents and forms that are required to bid. Who to contact for information. This is very important. Only an official source can provide information during bidding. Official modifications. If there is a change to the contract, perhaps increasing quantities or decreasing quantities or changing materials, before bids are opened, an addendum will be issued. And if you have more than one, it's called addenda. After the contract is awarded, then a change order would be. Keep that in mind. Before bids are received, changes are done by addendum. After the bidder is selected and the contract is signed, it's done by change order. There is a deadline for issuance of addendum. In other words, if the project is to be built with asphalt and someone decides to change it to concrete, that change cannot be made any closer than 72 hours or 3 days before bids are opened. That's called a material change. If, on the other hand, I want to delay bids for a week, I can do that a day before. If you ask for a change prior to bids, or even a change order after the contract is awarded, do not accept an okay over the phone. That helps, but do not rely upon it. It must be in writing, and it must be to everybody who is holding a set of plans for this project. And it has to come from the official contact person. If you are doing work for the county engineer, getting an okay from one of the county inspectors is not sufficient. Then there are the bid forms that you're required to have. Usually there is a bid sheet with either a unit price schedule or a lump sum in which you indicate the prices you are going to charge. There might be schedules and alternates. When we did airport projects, we might be rebuilding a runway and replacing the lighting along the edge of the runway. Well, most paving contractors don't know much about lighting, and most lighting contractors don't know much about paving. But we designed it as a single project, so we would have schedules. This would allow the paving people to bid only the paving portion, and the lighting people to bid only the lighting portion if they so chose. Alternates, on the other hand, are what-ifs. What if the cost of paving is so low that I can actually do more paving than I planned? So I will have what's called a base bid. The base bid will be what I am going to build no matter what. The alternate will be what I'd like to build if I have sufficient funds and the prices are low enough. Think about building a house. I'm going to build a house. I'm not going to include a garage. But if the price is right, I might have an alternate that adds the garage to it. When you submit the bid sheet, submitting it is agreeing to the various terms. That, let's say you did make a site visit, that the time for completion of the project you are agreeing to, that you have the wherewithal, the responsibility to complete this project. You will also submit bonds, and we'll talk about what those are. And then there might be other submittals that you have to make at that time, such as insurance or disadvantaged business enterprise work that is being done. The unit price schedule usually represents the item, the quantity, what we're measuring it by, what the price per unit is, hence the title, Unit Price Schedule, and the amount, the quantity times the price. And here I have asphalt, 2,000. Notice concrete is being paid for by the cubic yard, asphalt is being paid for by the ton. And then I total them out here, add it up, and I say I'm going to do the job for $180,000. If, for example, I use more than 100 cubic yards of concrete, or I use less than 2,000 tons of asphalt, whatever I use is paid for at this $90 price, and so it may wind up being a little bit more or a little bit less than this $180,000. On the other hand, a lump sum says, I expect to do 100 cubic yards of concrete and 2,000 tons of asphalt. Therefore, I will do the job for $185,000, period. The problem is that if the owner doesn't come back and say, well, let's do more paving, meaning a change in scope, you're going to live or die by that price. If the price goes up over $90, or you wind up using more than 2,000 tons of asphalt, you're not going to get any more than $185,000. In lump sum contracts, sometimes they do ask for a schedule of values that's similar to the unit price schedule, in which you break down your lump sum price by various components, so it becomes easier to measure how much you should be paid on a progress schedule. The basis of award and the right to reject. We were talking about alternates. Usually the basis is the base bid plus a combination of alternates, but that combination is based on the owner's decision. The lowest and best responsive and responsible. Well, responsive means that your bid answers what is asked. If I'm asking for brick on the house that I'm having built, you are not bidding vinyl siding. Responsible, you are able to do what is asked. Remember those two guys in a wheelbarrow I was talking about. Two guys in a wheelbarrow might be able to build your driveway, but might not be able to build a 5,000-foot runway. Lowest and best means lowest and best for the owner. On one occasion, I had a project where we selected the second low bidder because the project was being funded by state grants, and the way it was priced, the second low bidder, which was only $700 more out of a $90,000 contract than the low bidder, actually allowed the owner, the municipality, to use less of its own money and maximize the use of the grant. So let's go back to our contract documents. Contract forms. Let's take a look at contract forms. The bid bond. The bid bond is basically an insurance policy that tells the owner that should your bid be selected to do the work, you will indeed enter into a contract to do it. The agreement is the actual contract that you will sign, and oftentimes it includes the project manual and the contract drawings by reference as part of the contract. The performance bond is another insurance policy. This insurance policy gives the owner assurance that should you, for some reason, abandon the project, he can collect on this insurance and have the project completed. Insurance will be things like workers' compensation, builder's risk insurance, other types of insurance to assure the owner that you can perform the work and that he will not be at risk for any mistakes that you, the contractor, make. Certifications. Certain projects require that your laborers, your workers, be certified certain qualifications, such as welding or telephone wiring. Conditions of the contract. These are known as general conditions or general provisions. They provide information on bid procedures, definition of terms, who is the engineer, who will be doing the inspections, definition of a day. Is it a working day? Is it a calendar day? Well, it's raining here, but it's not raining on the job site. So do I get an extension of a day or not? Control of the work. The fact that the contractor has to maintain control of the work. Responsibility. What happens if in digging a pit you cut somebody's water line? This explains who is responsible and what needs to be done. QC and QA. QC is quality control. QA is quality assurance. And normally QC is you, the contractor, the steps you need to take to make sure that whatever you are installing or building is meeting the specifications and the plans. QA is usually from the owner's side, where an inspector will come in and check your work and inspect your work to see that it complies with the plans. Progress. Most contracts will require that you submit a schedule at the beginning showing how you will complete the project in the time allotted. And if not, this statement will normally explain how the owner can require you to add additional personnel, work Saturdays, work overtime, whatever, to recover the schedule and finish in the time specified. Measurement and payment. We all want to get paid for the work that we do. And understanding measurement and payment is very important, because if you do not understand it, you will not get paid properly. Here's an example. This is Akron-Canton Regional Airport. And we did a project in the early 2000s building this apron for the Army National Guard. During the course of the project, there was a dispute over additional quantities of material that had to be used in the paving. And one of the claims of the contractor was that when he installed the coarse aggregate under the asphalt, he used more than he expected to use. However, the way the contract was written, he was paid for the coarse aggregate on a volume basis. So he was measured by the width, the length, and the thickness of this area, a finite volume. And whether he used more aggregate or not, that was all that he was going to get paid for. Other issues about payment have to do with submittals. And we'll see in later presentations that the specifications say that the contractor can submit 4 progress payments. So you need to understand when you're going to get paid, what forms you need to submit, so that you can program your work so that you have the funds coming in to continue the work. Special or supplementary conditions is not explained in the book, but I like to point them out. These documents modify general conditions, and they avoid any assumptions. There's something in the general conditions that I want to change. If I change it in the original document, oftentimes you get a contractor who will look at that information and say, oh, I've seen this before, I don't need to keep reading. So by putting it in a separate section, you are drawing the contractor's attention to the fact that you have made the change. Here, for example, is the FAA conditions of the contract. Now, this is dated September 30th, 2009, and it is version 10E. I can tell you that the latest version was issued in December of 2018, and we're now up to H. But you can see how extensive the general provisions are. And here's something that the FAA spells out called precedence of contract provisions. For example, it says, in case of discrepancy, calculated dimensions will govern over scale dimensions. So it's telling you which is more important. And I won't read that all to you. You can read it at your leisure. But basically, this is what the FAA is saying, that the technical provisions of a contract will supersede all these different items. General provisions will supersede these items, and the plans will supersede these. So the plans may change standards, but the general provisions will change the plans, and the technical provisions will change the general provisions. But they also say if there are any special provisions, they will govern over technical or general provisions. Well, when I was doing airport work, we never liked this version of it. So we changed it to where the lowest totem pole was general provisions and the biggest trump card was plans. Why? Because for any project, the plans will always be different. Special technical provisions are something unique over regular technical provisions, and special general provisions are something unique over general provisions. General provisions are what we call the boilerplate. They're pretty much always going to be the same, so each one will change. Now, the reason this is important for print reading is because I was doing a contract one time, and the contractor says that he was allowed to do something because he was relying upon the organization that the FAA had. And I pointed out to him that he needed to turn the page so he could see this, because following this format, he was incorrect in his assumption. So that leads us to rule number 4. Never stop reading. Contractors sometimes will find what they are looking for and not read any further. Always read everything to make sure you haven't missed something. Now we get to technical specifications or technical provisions. Sometimes you'll hear these referred to as the specs. The CSI master format is one form of technical provisions, but there are other formats such as those produced by FAA or ODOT. And sometimes you will have special technical provisions, and these are just like the special general provisions. These are the master format divisions. I'm not sure, this is 2004, and so they have more up-to-date versions. But you notice we have existing conditions, concrete, general requirements, metals, finishes. Nothing in here about paving. Nothing in here about electrical lighting, or rather airport lighting. So keep in mind, not every section must be used. If you do not have any fire suppression need in your project, you do not have to have Division 21. It is not a requirement that you use CSI master format specifications. So not every project is going to use them. For example, the FAA technical provisions. This is for earthwork. This is for flexible base courses, and you can see the different options that are available. Rather extensive in the different technical provisions that are available to you, but clearing and grubbing, for example, is where we are clearing trees and taking out stumps. If I have an open field, I'm not going to use clearing and grubbing. Keep that in mind. Addenda and modifications, we've talked about this a little while ago. Just a reminder, if I need to make changes to the contract, to the drawings, to the specifications, I do it by addendum, but that is before bids are received. There's a time limit prior to bid that I can make a material change. I will use a modification, a contract modification, or a change order after the contract is signed. And I may have a request for information from the contractor that precipitates making this change order. And if you are timely, you give notice, and you have it accepted, you can avoid a lot of heartache with modifications. For timeliness means if I see that there's a problem, that something needs to be changed, I have a particular time limit in which to tell the owner. I have to send him a letter, give him proper notice, and I have to have a letter back from him saying that he accepts that it is a change and it is going to be an extra or additional time, and hopefully you will get it made a official part of the contract before you do any work. During project closeout, you will be submitting warranties and bonds. Warranty is usually in construction for a term of 1 year, not unlike the 90-day warranty you might get from an auto repair. Watch for the trigger. When does that 1 year start? And we'll see in later presentations a little bit more of how that comes into play. The labor and material payment bond is an assurance to the owner that you have paid all your workers and all your suppliers. That can be also covered by a waiver of lien. And we'll talk in a minute about this article from Civil Engineering Magazine from April 2010. The maintenance bond is also usually for 1 year, and it can replace the warranty, and it allows the owner to make a claim against the bonding company, if, for example, one of the components, furnace, air conditioning, fails to work within 1 year. This is the article that I was referring to. I am not going to go into any great detail on it. If you would like to read it and put something in the discussion board about it, ask some questions, be glad to talk about it. The main takeaway is that this contractor did additional work that he was not paid for at the time, and it was not put into the contract as a change order. He was required to submit waivers of lien, which basically said, I've been paid for everything up to this point. The document he had to submit allowed him to say, except for these outstanding claims. And he failed to check that box. And so he was not allowed to recover these additional costs. So again, just reading the prints may not be sufficient. You may be required to understand how it is all put together so that you wind up getting paid for it. So now we come to what everyone thought the course was all about, and that is the contract drawings, the plans. So let's look at the types of plans that are available that we'll be talking about. There's plot plans, floor plans, elevations, sections, details, and specialty drawings. A plot plan, sometimes referred to as a site plan. It will show the size, the shape, the location of the site, of any building that's on the site, its relation to other buildings and objects. So here is a good example of a plot plan. You can see here's a contour line telling me about the shape of or the slope of the land. Notice this has an elevation of 3 feet. This has an elevation of 1 foot. That tells me from this point to this point, my site is sloping downward. We have angles for the property lines. We have length of the property lines. we have a tree located, we have the building located. I can find this corner because I know where it is in relation to everything else. The setback, the building has to be at least 30 feet from the existing sidewalk. Where my utilities are, a utility pole. These are all things that are shown on a plot plan. Floor plans will show the locations of exterior walls, interior partitions, or doors, windows, or other components. Again, an interior position, an exterior wall, all dimensioned. Notice these slashes will terminate dimension lines. Doors, windows, all these things are included on floor plans. Elevations, it's an orthographic projection of a feature. It is looking from the side of any object we're building. And here's a typical elevation where you are looking at the side, so you can see the roof, you can see the walls, you can see the windows. A section is usually a slice through a component. It gives you information about the inside of that component, about the construction. And here are some examples of a wall section through the front door and wall. So insulation, components, wide flange beam, slab on grade. And details might be sections, they might be plans, they might be elevations, but they are drawn to a larger scale so you can see the very close-up of it. And here are some examples of sections, again drawn to bigger scales so you can see the details. And then specialty drawings. Specialty drawings are those that don't fall into the previous categories, and they can be unique to the project. They might be wiring diagrams, they might be phasing drawings. Build this portion first, then build before you build something else. In a highway project, for example, it might show the detour routes. In summary, when you're given a set of construction documents, you want to review all the documents, the drawings, sit down and page through them and get a sense of what they're telling you. Read the boilerplate. Understand the technical specifications. Then go over it again and review the details. And follow the order of construction. If you're designing it, it's easier to put the drawings together in the same sequence that the work will be built. If you're the contractor, follow that sequence as you review the drawings, and it will make it that much more understandable. And that concludes the presentation for week 2.